So guys, let's now move to some principle for designing effective DAL or data access layers. So the first principle we have to consider is the separations. Actually, why the separation? Actually, because it's the fundamentals of the software development or software architecture layer. So here, once you write your code, you don't have to keep everything together. So we have to separate our code based on, we can say it's based on its purpose, So the first uh, we can say principle is uh, the separation of the concepts. So here we should emphasize that we have to divide the software into sections, into, we can say, components. So each component is responsible about a job or about some task. For example, one is responsible about make a connection between the database and the application, and the other one is responsible about, for example, is manipulating the data, or for example, is executing the business logic. So third one is related, or we can say responsible about the interact with the users. So this is the separation. Actually is the fundamental of uh, DAL or the axis principle architecture layer. So the second one is the abstractions. What we mean by the abstractions here, in the abstractions means that we try to make it simple. We try to, as we say, we divide ours into separations, into sections. So here we try to make it as much as we can is we keep some abstractions. Means that now when you are designing the interface, the connection between the database and the application. So as we see, this is now the connections, for example, files or the connection sections is responsible about making the connections. So now when we come, for example, to the second part, which is manipulating the data, for example, now we want to do some, for example, reading information or deleting or updating. So we try to make this level of, or these sections as, for example, is high levels. Means that we don't have to ask the user in, or the developers in these sections to deal with the database. No, now he is working on another level of abstracts. Means that you don't work on the data, you are working, for example, in on the entities only, on the entities. So you don't have to worry about how we can save this to the database, because there is another section will do that. Another section will do that. So now is your concern for only to, for example, adding or receiving the information from the user, receiving the information from the user. So, and then it will pass this information to another sections, and that section responsible about deal with database, deal with database. So this is what we mean by the abstractions and encapsulations. So here we have to just bound our data and method that it's operate on a single unit. We can say we can call it like this, single unit of our applications. So we come to the last, which is actually, we can say, is the benefit of using this separation and abstraction. Now it's also a concern about the maintenance of the application. So once we following this, for example, the separation and the abstraction and consent and encapsulations, so now we are making our application is maintainable and extendable. Now let's move to the new topic. Actually, it's not new topic. You see, is actually almost same to our topic, which is data access objects. We have here our topics is data access layer. So what the relation between them? So guys, now okay, you know something about the data access layer, and you start say I want to use this data access layer. I want to follow this or design my applications. So here, guys, you can use some design patterns. Design patterns. You can use them design pattern that meet or uh, meet our DAL or data access layer principles. So now one of them, I mean the principles, for example, of data access layer, as we mentioned in the previous slides, it's, for example, the abstraction, the separation, the encapsulations, right? So we want to use, or we want to develop our application, or we want to design our data access layer, and we need that concept principles. So we can use DAO. DAO actually it's a design pattern that's actually what we can say it's meet these principles, meet these principles. So it's, as I mentioned, it's the design patterns used to design the data access layer. And the main purpose of this actually is to meet the principles of the data access layer of this like separation, abstraction, encapsulations. Separate every part of our application into sections. So it will be a section, for example, let's imagine this DAO as a section. So here we have one code or one section, it's combined all the code, all the works related to student. So anything is related to the student, for example, either okay, any, for example, any operations can be done on the student in the data, so it will be under student DAO. Another things for teacher, so it will be under teacher DAO. So this is, as I mentioned, it's just a design patterns. It's just the design patterns. So when we do that, actually we are try to separate the component of the application from each other. So here, as I mentioned, is the, maybe you can say the primary purpose of the DAO is to provide interface for accessing and manipulating the data for a specific, maybe we can say for a specific table, let's say that, or from specific data, and shielding the rest of the application from this part. So this is just, as you can see, is the design pattern that we can use it for designing the data access layer. So let's move now to the next. So now we come to the design. For example, let's say we want to. So here, guys, the practical steps for designing them. So when you have in their application and you want to follow this uh, design pattern, or you can say the layers perspective. So you have to follow these steps for designing your applications. So let's say, guys, we take any application, for example, let's say software, or let's say student management system or employee systems. So that's employee system. So as the first step, we have to define or identify the objects in your applications. So let's say we have the student, or let's say employee management system. So the first one, for example, let's say the main table, which is the employee, right? So we have, for example, let's say we have the first object, which is the employee. We have also the department, right? So and so on. So all the objects, we have to identify the objects. Also, we have to identify what operation it should be covered by these, or should be done on these objects. For example, here, employee. So what we want to do on the employee, we want to create employee, save employee, delete employee, and update employee. So this is the basic operation. So we have to define as well these operations. So what the next? After we define our objects here, what we have to do? Now we go for the next step, which is our concern actually, and maybe the other steps actually is just details, but here is our concern, which is designing the DAO. So since we are following this or using DAO, so we have to create a class, or in maybe another language, say let's say Java, we have to create a class for each object in our system. So now we have here at least, let's say we have these two objects, employee and departments. So we have to create one employee DAO, and what? And department DAO. Okay, and department DAO. So in employee DAO, should everything is related to employee. All the informations or all the methods related to the employee should be in this file, in the employee DAO. And the same things, all the methods related to the department should be in department DAO. So this is, by doing this, what we are separating. We are now separating everything. So this is the first concept of data access layer, which is the separations. Also encapsulation. So now once we give or we put everything related to the employee in the same file here, and everything related to the department in another file, so we are encapsulate everything. Also now the next step, or the third step actually, is, so now let's say, okay, we complete this step. So we have now employee DAO or emp DAO, department DAO, and other objects DAO. Everything's have its own DAO. So now what we have to create, or let's say we choose our persistence mechanism. So in database programming, or in general in database, the persistence means that storing the data and accessing the data. So how to store the data, how to save the data. So any methods that you use, for example, let's say use JDBC or use ORAM, use whatever you use. So you select that one, and then you create the connections. Create the connection based on these methods. So let's say we select the JDBC, okay, connections, and then we create the connection for this. So now guys, once we create the connection here, we not create it here. What we did here? Actually, we make some abstractions. In that for when the user want to use this DAO, we don't have to worry about the connection, how the connection look like. So this is now we try to just implement the concept of DAO, which is data access layer. As I mentioned, this is just general steps. Later maybe you can add more details, and you can also add more layers. So this is the steps. So let's see an example on just some codes. Just as I mentioned, you don't have to now to worry about the code and how to understand everything about the code. Just I want you to understand, or we can say, the files that should be in your application. So as I mentioned, we have now the objects. Let's say we have here the example is employee, right? So we create objects. We know the objects. We already defined the objects. So the object is employee. Now we create employee DAO for that object. And in this, so you don't have to worry about this. What is this? But okay, in this place, we have to list all the methods related to the employee. We have to put, for example, select the data, delete, update. Okay, all the methods. Okay, whatever. So now we are not talking about is it JDBC but this is JDBC methods, but data, whatever we use, we should put here in the DAO all the methods related to employee, which is, for example, update the table, delete the table, or update the employee, delete employee, insert employee. So get all the information about the employee. So this is just one method, which is get all the information about the employee. So as I mentioned, just see that the file here, employee DAO. So now we can use that. Now we can use all the methods here from the application, from the main applications. But since we are trying to follow our patterns, so we can also create another file, which is we can be employee service, and this is actually it's use the DAO service. You use the DAO methods. But also we can direct use these methods from the main applications, So here we create this just to also to follow our steps. So this service will be serve as a business logic layer. So now we can see now the presentation layer where we will use these methods. So here you see here we just create we can say object, and then we will deal with these objects. So you don't have to worry about how to save the data, how this is, because that one is belong to the DAO file, not belong to the main application or presentation layer, not belong to the presentation layer. So here we can now start using the methods, So guys, also we have also the last file, which is the connections. So as I mentioned, we separate the connection in different file because we want to also encapsulate or we can say abstract our works. Then we don't have to worry about the connection. So you are in the DAO, you just connect to the database. How is connection? The connection should be done here in this file, So guys, this is an example just to show you the layers and also how we can follow some patterns. And the next actually is just explain this example in details. So I will leave it for you to just read it, or you can skip it because I already explained everything. So here, as I mentioned, this example using JDBC, we will use JDBC and we will use also other things, which is Oracle. We'll use also Oracle. So as I mentioned, this is just to explain the code step by step. So guys, okay guys, now since this it's online, so if you have any question, you can write it down and then we can discuss that in the next class. Thank you for your times. See you in the class.